Thanks for tuning in to my session, which is all about personal. What is it, and really, why does it matter, right? And so, firstly, I'll share a bit about my story, who I am, and also the sort of social impact projects I've been working on. But really, most of the session is going to be all about this idea of expanding your surface area of luck. And I'm going to talk more about this concept later. But it's going to be about how actually putting yourself out there, making some noise, can actually very much benefit your social impact projects and actually help take them to the next level. So yeah, a bit about me. My name is Reese. I am a social entrepreneur, community builder, and speaker, passionate about all things project-based learning, all things education, but also all things now in technology policy as well. I did my final year undergrad at the London School of Economics, and my background is primarily as the founder of IZZY HK, a youth-led nonprofit in Hong Kong, where over the past 5 years now, we've had over 500 volunteers across 80 schools working on scaling project-based learning. And a few different projects here and there, including impact communities with the Global Shapers community as part of the World Economic Forum, and others as well. Here's a bit more about my organization, where we focus on the SDGs 4, 8, and 17 for the past few years. And this is some of the work that we've been working on, including multimedia projects, everything you see here, youth-led, youth-oriented, youth-designed, all the way to in-person capacity building events, where we brought together these amazing young change makers here in Hong Kong for a day of upskilling. And I think my change making journey essentially put me in a lot of amazing opportunities to meet amazing people. And I think really the sort of sense is I had this chance to build 21st century change making skills. So what is that about? It's all about this idea of having fluid teamwork, shared leadership, creative problem solving. And I'm sure you guys are sort of building and developing these skills and mastering these skills as well in your own journeys. But really sort of my call to people who haven't started or maybe are looking to take the next step is, for example, in high school, I think it's a lot of times a very good place to start, in university as well, but even afterwards. Again, generally there's reduced risk. You're able to have a very supportive ecosystem, and you're able to have this sort of rapid skill development. And I know for myself, really starting social action and really building this sort of impact journey for myself really helped me expand my own imaginatory horizons about what's possible, right? In terms of careers, in terms of who is out there, what other opportunities are out there. And so my experience brought me all the way to 10 Downing Street, to the World Economic Forum, to meet the royal family. And so the sort of secret sauce here is how do you sort of get to that point where you're able to really have your opportunities work for themselves? And so you can see over here, this is, some big companies that right? IKEA, Bosch, Mercedes-Benz. And one of the things about companies and what we think about brands is the fact of the matter is they're very recognizable, the bright colors. You sort of associate some keywords, terminologies, ideas around these brands, right? But we've seen over the past, I suppose, decade or so, more of this push towards personal branding. This idea that you can apply the same principles of brand strategy from companies to your career, to yourself as an individual. And initially that would seem pretty weird, right? It's like, why do I have to brand myself? Why can't my work speak for itself? How would I brand myself as an individual when I'm not a company or an organization, right? But really, if you think about what personal branding is doing, it's expanding your surface area of luck. And what does this look like, right? Practically speaking, if you look at really sort of the matrix of success, perhaps, and this is obviously very simplified, but you can see there's maybe generally two axes. One is this x-axis where it's about how good you are at telling others what you do. And then there is a y-axis, which is all about how good you are at actually doing what you do. And a lot of the times you would fall sort of on one end of the spectrum and maybe more than another, right? Let's say you're very good, you're an expert, you're world-class at what you do. Probably, generally speaking, you wouldn't need to really share much about it, right? Your work speaks for itself. You're able to convene opportunities and new sort of projects as well. And it sort of keeps spiraling from there. And then on the other end, you have people who are like world class at just talking, right? Who may be politicians, maybe a lot of these organizers, where perhaps they don't need to have real substantive action or coordination. Their skill is in sharing about what they do. And perhaps they could get by if they're, again, world class at it. But for most people, including myself, maybe we're along the spectrum, right? We're pretty good at what we do, maybe. We're pretty good at telling what to do, speaking about what we do. And it's exactly about finding that balance. Because if you're good at both things, you're able to then reach this top quadrant where you essentially have the best chance of luck. You're pretty good at what you do. You're very good at telling others about your impact and getting them on board. That's going to magnify your surface area of luck. How does that work exactly? It means that, let's say you're doing some great work, you're sharing about it, other people hear about it more, they're more likely to bring you new opportunities, they're more likely to reach out, they're more likely to want to collaborate, work with you as a client, as a stakeholder, and that sort of keeps spiraling again and again and again. So it's really thinking about in your own work, how do you want to sort of be interacting between these two sort of variables? Doing your good work, but also sharing, speaking about it, because this really helps get you further ahead. But if you really want to even boil it down more, fundamentally what personal branding is all about is just how are you being perceived, right? Are you being seen as someone who is trustworthy, reliable, able to bring people together, for example? And again, if we really look at what this is all about, it's really just about image and reputation. And it's not a radically new concept. We've had this concept of reputation since probably since the sort of initially sort of the dawn of human history. When you think about when we had initial forms of trade and bartering, if you traded or exchanged like fake goods, for example, you'll have a reputation as the person that can't be trusted, for example. If you were, a person who was very violent, for example, you'd be known as that as well. So this is not a radically new concept. This idea of image and reputation has been around for a long time. But what is different about the moment we're in now is now we see our digital selves. We see the idea that it's not just about our in-person actions. It's about how we present ourselves online, how we present ourselves in all these disparate spaces as well. So essentially, it's about managing your image and reputation, but now you have so many more tools, avenues, platforms to do so, and also to advance your cause. But really, to the sort of core of it, why does it even matter? There's a few things. Back to that surface area of luck, not only that, it helps you meet amazing people, right? I think a lot of the times I see amazing people who do fantastic work, but because they're sort of afraid of putting themselves out there, taking that first step, they sort of miss out on many opportunities to simply meet other exciting people working in their space, their domains. It could be more practical reasons, for example, internships, job opportunities, all the way to like really high impact things, right? Such as leadership roles, speaking opportunities, and much more. And again, it's very much a virtuous cycle, meaning that these things feed back to your main work, your activism, your social action, your sort of project work. Because with new opportunities, there's new possibilities to scale what you're doing as well. And to, again, raise the visibility of what you do. And so now we're really moving on to the how-tos, right? So you're like, Reese, okay, great. Now I know about why, but what is actually the how-tos in terms of how do I make my brand, my personal brand? And so I borrowed this pretty useful framework from Karen Khan. There's an amazing book called Branding Pays. And it's really sort of distilling this idea of brand strategy, again, applying it to individuals. And these are the sort of the 5 things you should be thinking about in terms of action plans. Number 1 is your positioning. So what is your unique selling point in the space that you work in? What is it about your work that is perhaps different or unique in some way? Or what's the angle, right? Secondly, it's just about messaging. So it's about, what is your tagline? What is your headline? What are the things you want to be sharing? What are your core messages, right? Your advocacy pillars. What does this look like? What are you about? What's your pitch, right? What's your 30-second pitch? Thirdly, it's a bit meta, but this idea of your brand strategy. It's like, okay, how do you actually sort of coordinate this strategy? Will you have a several-step plan? in terms of I will reach out to here, I will go to this conference, I will post about this content? Is there a sort of a bigger roadmap about what you actually want to do and what do you want to achieve with this idea of a brand? Next is your ecosystem. So really it's about your network, both people you know in your life, but digitally as well. Who is in your community that you could sort of bring in, ask for help, and really help magnify your own brand as well. And lastly, very simply, an action plan. You need to be able to carry things out. You need to be able to put a sort of practical version of this plan into actual steps, timelines, KPIs, that sort of thing. And okay, if we want to move more granularly, what does this even mean? It looks like actually, for example, creating content, right? Depends on the platform you want to be on. It depends where your stakeholders are, but it could be, for example, on LinkedIn, it could be on X, it could be on your own blog, for example, but it's creating content and pieces of content essentially that you can share, circulate, and disseminate into various ways and repurpose a lot of times. Secondly, it could be looking at specifically a media strategy. So for your work, it could be looking at, let's say you've already done something amazing. Now, how do you make some noise about it, right? It could be specifically pitching to media outlets, to other organizations in the adjacent space to say, hey, we've done this amazing report, we've done this amazing event, would you be able to share about it? But what I think is the key here is you really need to think about the right pitch. Why should this, for example, media organization cover your work? Like what about their sort of focus area or their sort of news coverage would relate? What's the hook? Why? Why should people care, right? And it's really trying to distill and think from their perspective as well. It's like, what value would it bring to their readers? So really, when you have a high impact event or a project or a publication, think about what's the angle that will really make sense for that specific publication that you're reaching out to. Next, speaking engagements. So really, it's an advocacy platform, right? Having the scope and space to really share exactly about what you're working on and what you stand for. So a lot of the times, it might even just be convening and creating your own event. I think this is a great strategy where, you want the opportunity to speak. Perhaps you invite another person and you could be a moderator, for example. Or you could, I do a lot of these creative dinners where I'm inviting people I've met before, and you're able to have that platform to have an event that you're organizing to bring people together, and you're able to share about your work for that way. So a lot of times it also could be messaging, emailing conferences and telling them what you do and why you'd like to share on their platform as well. But the last step is really about collaborating with other young change makers and impact makers, like to amplify your impact. So thinking about, okay, even with your organizations or projects, are there ways to collaborate, right? And this is some sort of easy wins to really get yourself started. But I think beyond that, there's some wider points around this mindset shift around just being willing to network, being willing to go to these networking events, join online communities, and in many cases, there are network effects, right? Meaning you join in one space, you're able to tap into other networks and other nodes. Next is find a mentor. So having someone who's more experienced in this space who can actually give you tangible feedback and tangible sort of advice on maybe who you should reach out to. Maybe they can make introductions as well. I think lastly, back to this mindset shift point, it's about seeking out opportunities, right? Getting to subscribe to newsletters, going into communities, and just knowing what's going on also, again, increases your surface area of luck because you're able to take advantage of the opportunities that come about. And I think one of the quotes I love is this idea of what is luck, right? Luck is when opportunity, I might be quoting this wrong, but when opportunity meets preparation, right? It's when something comes about, but you're able to be in the right position, in the right place, in the right time, perhaps, to take advantage of it. So there's very much about your individual capacity to seize the opportunity, to make the most out of it. Now, one of the platforms I want to delve deeper into is LinkedIn, because this is a sort of nowadays the platform to build a personal brand unless you have your own blog, unless you have your own platform already. This is a great way to really get started because, let's say in the social impact space, a lot of your stakeholders are there, a lot of folks, let's say in the corporate business environment would be there as well. And a lot more students and young people are also on LinkedIn. But really, what is the innovation of LinkedIn, right? If you think about what LinkedIn was, it's essentially fundamentally was a job site. People shared jobs and applied for jobs. But really what I think is the great innovation of LinkedIn is something slightly different. It's this idea of the CV being a public document. in a sense, right? You historically, CVs were things you printed off, you handed to people, and it's not something you would publicly share about. You wouldn't necessarily want all your education details, your work details, your projects like out there and open. But what I think is the radical part about LinkedIn is this idea that generally, if you're on the platform, at any given moment of time, you can have millions of people uh, checking out your profile and potentially sending you new opportunities. And again, not that happens very often because people need to find your profile, unless you have maybe a viral post. And again, we'll talk more about that later. But at any given moment of time, your sort of CV is basically publicly accessible to millions and millions of people. And that initially would be very daunting, right? You're like, okay, why I don't want to share this information about myself. But think about the opportunity. Think about the possibility of getting your work in front of millions and millions of people at any given point in time. About what new things that could bring about for you as an individual, for your organization. So that is sort of how I think about LinkedIn as really a transformation of social norms around what we should be sharing about, and really this idea of possibility. And here are some misconceptions about what LinkedIn is for, right? One of the big ones is LinkedIn is only for working professionals who are looking for a job. And I think, again, it's changed over time. LinkedIn was conceived as a job platform by Reid Hoffman, but over time, it's really transformed into a modern social media where you can share, and people value authenticity, people value storytelling, people value a more human side of the platform. Some people criticize this, but that's the evolution of the platform, is becoming this sort of all-encompassing social media as well. And you can use that to your advantage, right? And increasingly, it's not just for working professionals. You have a lot of students, you have a lot of young people, retirees looking to switch careers. It's now a much broader swathe of people. Secondly, there's big misconceptions around sort of not having much job experience, and therefore it's this sense of what's the point of making a profile? And when I speak to a lot of, say, high school students, for example, a lot of them are like, I have nothing to put. Why would I do it? And I think my advice has always been, even if you don't have much to include, simply having a profile that shows like your basic information, maybe education or maybe anything, is better than nothing, because now at least you're able to be found online. And a lot of the times, whether that's other organizations, people, opportunities you're looking for, they want to cross-reference and cross-check that, hey, this person actually exists. Hey, this person is actually part of the institution or the organization that they're a part of. So even at the very basic level, it's sort of an expectation to be on the platform, even if you're not really fully utilizing the possibilities and benefits of the platform. And so beyond that, LinkedIn is also very good at helping you sort of see different sort of possibilities for yourself as well. One thing I love to do is like look at what other people are working on, see what other people's projects are looking like, and what strategies they use to scale. For example, what are cool, educational opportunities or fellowships people are involved in. And it's a very good way to sort of map out what opportunities are out there and what are things that you could do yourself. There's that. The final point is you have to get started somewhere. Even if you don't have much experience, get that experience, but whilst keep feeding it back to the platform, you're able to sort of build that platform. And also, it's also, again, space to reach out, right? You can ask people for help, ask people for feedback, ask people to collaborate. So there's a lot more to LinkedIn than just a profile, right? Fundamentally, it's a social media platform where you can reach out to people about the people. And putting yourself in that ecosystem means you can take advantage of them. Lastly, it's this sort of sense of having other platforms. I think that's probably true. If you have a very strong Instagram, TikTok, or other digital presence, or your own website, that's also fine. It's also good to have as a complementary even to LinkedIn. But I think what's unique about LinkedIn is this general professionalized sense where it's still this place where people will go to and people will check for most opportunities as well. So I think there's no real harm or downside necessarily, in my opinion, to having a LinkedIn. And it's not something you have to keep up to date every single moment of your life, but simply being there and again, taking those next steps are going to, I think, massively improve your visibility. So here are some quick tips and tricks. I won't sort of exhaust you guys with sort of every single thing you can do on the platform. I'm sure some of you already have amazing profiles, but Simple ones include just making your profile and cover photo stand out. And again, back to basic brand strategy and principles, right? You want something that sticks. You want something that is able to clearly show who you are, but also potentially with your banner, communicate your values, communicate what you're working on. And you can sort of play around with formats, and Canva is a great tool to design your as well. You also probably want to customize your profile URL. That's a quick fix. Like, it's easier to send out. You don't want some random assortment of numbers. You might want to look at catchy profile headlines. So instead of just listing a role, it could be looking at what other roles you're looking for, what sector you're in, what you're passionate about, what are your values, and these are all things you can really integrate. Another one that's often overlooked is this idea of like a good summary. So summary is essentially the sort of top part of your profile right underneath where you can talk about your experiences. And people generally underutilize this, but it's a great opportunity to share exactly what things you're working on, and also, again, how people can reach out or how people can work with you. The last two is just really do fill out your profile, add your experiences, add media files to really spice up your profile. And again, as I said, how you can start is simply building out right at a relevant section, stay active, and really it's a step-by-step process, but you have to get started somewhere. But I think what's important, and this is tailored to sort of a younger audience as well, but it's also looking at future opportunities. So I think it's very much thinking about further projects and things. How can you sort of set yourself up for success in the future? And getting started on LinkedIn is a very good way to do that. Now, sort of hopefully what this helped articulate is essentially what is personal branding, why is it important, and how you can really get started. So essentially, if you haven't already started or take that first step, this is like a drop in the water to really help create that ripple effect where you really do take action and really take that next step. But yeah, that's essentially it for me. Feel free, of course, to connect with me on LinkedIn, but I'll save the rest of the time really to answer any questions you might have as well, but also happy to delve deeper into specific questions you might have, specific areas you might want to get feedback on. And yeah, super happy to just work with you guys here. What I leave on the screen is essentially this 5-step plan. And I think this can really help you get started. I think if you have time, maybe even for the rest of the session, just jot this down, right? Like, what's your positioning? What's your messaging? What's your brand strategy? What's your ecosystem? What's your plan? Okay, cool. I got a question in the chat. How have you used AI to help with this process? This is a great question. I think AI is something that amplifies you, who you are, right? And I know a lot of people who go to step further who like use AI just to write and content and just post it. I think that's fine if you really don't have time, but it's not going to be authentic to your voice and to the content you create. So I think really what AI is good for though is repurposing content, helping you reformulate, reformat things. So say you have like a very short text that you wrote, AI can help you rejig it so that it's now suitable for a different platform, for example. From your blog to LinkedIn, from your blog to Instagram, for example. That's very helpful. Another thing is you can use AI as a sort of like assistant to essentially critique your own profile. So now there's a lot of tools where you can essentially just upload a link to your LinkedIn or screenshot it. It can give you really good feedback about what you need to work on, what's missing, what impression it has of you as well. And you can use that to sort of play around, improve sort of your outcomes. It's also very helpful for refining specific things like impact statements, your summary section, your headline. So it can help you really tighten up your wording and also ensure that what you're communicating is like on point. I wouldn't say it's useful to be over reliant on it, but it's a great way to really polish your work and also really to help hit that mark in terms of the messaging you want to communicate. Yeah, great question, Virginia. Yeah, feel free to drop any questions in the chat. Happy to answer them. And of course, we do want to reach out afterwards as well. Feel free to contact me on my email at contact@reesewong.com or just my website as well, reesewong.com. A final point as well, if you don't have one already, like a website is a great way as well as an alternative to LinkedIn or as a complementary thing to LinkedIn, is essentially, it's a great way, it's a platform you own, right? If you build your own website, you're able to really play around with formats, add more media files as well. Again, that's very impactful. and it's something you can send. It's more, especially if you're in other sectors that aren't as heavy on like traditional experiences, it's a great way to like build a portfolio, for example. It's very useful. Great, more questions, more questions. Yes, I love this, Virginia, around this idea of one-to-one. So this is a great one, right? And it's really sometimes overlooked in personal branding. And it's because you're thinking, oh, it's all about content, it's all about digital presence. But really, one of the great ways to really get people to know you is to talk to them, right? Like this could simply, again, be through a platform like LinkedIn or even through a conference like this, where essentially you're reaching out to people and say, hey, I'd love to learn more about what you do. And I've known people say here, I'm based in London in the UK, where essentially, let's say they come about, they're here for like a month. They basically identify who are the key people in the ecosystem. Let's say they're interested in entrepreneurship. Who are the key people in the ecosystem or the university entrepreneur ecosystem they should meet? And they sort of identify these community builders, these key nodes. And once you meet these people, they will introduce you, but also they know other people. So it's sort of, you already build a network quite organically, intentionally, but also in an organic way by simply meeting these key nodes and really also just having this appetite to meet new people and learn from people. This is very good to build a habit of it as well, because again, sometimes you sort of lose track, but it's very good to say every week, talk to 2 new people, for example. Be intentional about saying, hey, I'm gonna reach out to 2 new people. And if you look how many people that is per year and say you're doing nothing else, that's already sort of saying how many, that's like 100 plus people, right? And that's already amazing. Great question I have from Maria. Where did you learn to promote yourself? This is a great question. I think for myself, it almost came as a result of need, in a sense, where I was building my organization, I was scaling it to the next level. And part of it was like inbound. I found like, okay, we were the first to do this, or we did it to the largest scale. As a result, people were like wanting to cover the organization and media outlets or inviting me to speak. So part of it was like, okay, I did the work. Now people are inviting me to share more. So that was one part of it. The other part as well was like, I needed to say, get more people to join my organization, or I needed to take it to the next level. So as a result, I also needed to put myself out there to ensure that the organization is properly reflected, people know about what we do, and it all sorts of, again, works in this virtuous cycle where you do something, people are curious, interested, they reach out again and again and again. So I think that's really where it came from for myself. It's like I was building something, I needed more people to join me, to support me, or to work with me, and it sort of worked that way to really, again, scale even more. Again, I might leave it there. You know how to reach me. Reach me at contact@reesewong.com or find me on my website. I think my last sort of leaving piece of advice is like, just think about what works for you, but how to take that first step, build a habit of posting content, just fixing your digital presence, or to even just meet people in real life. There's many ways to do this, but hopefully I articulated here why you should do it, why it's important, and really, if you do it well, how it can really magnify and amplify your work to the next level. All right, thank you so much, everyone, and yeah, I hope to keep in touch, and yeah, see you guys soon.